Good morning again, as we just saw each other backstage. Welcome, everyone who's joined us online, and welcome to Jørgen and Espen. This, I believe, and I may be wrong, so correct me in the comments if I am wrong, but I think this is episode number 6 of Mixpanel's In Conversation With series. Where I get the pleasure of spending some time, usually on a Tuesday or Wednesday morning, chatting with some of our customers from across the EMEA and LATAM region. We've had Italian speakers. I think we've had UK businesses, but an Irish chap that I connected with. We've had someone from Brazil in Portuguese, hosted by one of our partners out in Brazil. We've had Nigerian bank. We've had a whole bunch. And now we are joined by Vipps, the biggest payment application in Norway, and Espen and Jørgen, who I get the pleasure of chatting with today. Like always, I'd love to start with you guys introducing yourselves, and also for those who potentially don't know Vipps or Vipps Mobile Pay, an introduction to the organization. Espen, will we start with you?
Yeah, product manager for the new team, user new bets. So we're supposed to make new products, new features, and now we are currently, I think, 4 or 5 members in the team, so it's growing. Using Mixpanel every day to kind of measure out what bet we are going to jump on.
Nice, and that's new features on an existing product or multiple product lines?
That we're kind of in that discussion right now. Like, do we make a big new product or do we make small experiments, new features for other existing products? So it's a new team, so it's didn't really yet settle the strategy, but we're
nice position to be in. Free rein, go and decide what you want to do.
Yeah, that's really cool, and having like, okay, I'm starting to brag about Mixpanel right now, but having Mixpanel, but if we're going to do a lot of experiments, a lot of new features for existing products, like we wouldn't be able to do it without Mixpanel. Like, to have the data up front, doing A/B tests and testing out new stuff, it's really a good tool there.
Awesome. Jørgen.
Yeah, I'm Jørgen, product manager for Vipps Checkout, which is sort of our vehicle for transitioning Vipps. I'll talk a bit about Vipps in a second. Transitioning Vipps from a payment method to more like a payment provider, make an off-the-shelf product for accepting payments online, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Vipps Mobile Pay is, as you said, or Vipps is the biggest wallet in Norway. Mobile Pay is the biggest in Denmark. So we both started out as sort of P2P applications, transferring money to friends and family, but gradually merged into P2B business. We have insane usage in the Nordics, Norway, Denmark, and Finland, where basically around 95% of the population in both Norway and Denmark are monthly active users of the different applications. So it's relatively really high proportion, but the absolute figures aren't that big, since we are like Norway and Denmark, 2 small countries on the fringes of Europe. So we have like 4 million monthly average users for Vipps and 4.5 for mobile pay.
Nice.
And we just merged this spring.
Nice penetration of the market opportunity. How did that happen? How do you dominate so quickly like that, in your honest opinion?
I think it's a combination of 2 factors. The common story is that Vipps solved a really big problem, how to send money to your friends and family. We absolutely did, and we have done it in a very good way. But I think it also helps to be backed by the marketing muscles of the largest banks in Norway. Vipps is owned by Norwegian banks, was previously solely owned by DNB, the largest Norwegian bank. And this project was started by the former CEO of DNB. So I think we got a bit of help from there as well. But basically, it's about solving the problem. before, if you need to transfer money to your friends, you need to ask them like, what's your bank account number, 11-digit number, which no one has any relationship to. Now it's just, what's your phone number? And you can Vipps. Now everyone has Vipps. So dual-sided economies of scale.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised we don't see more tier one banks in other regions tackling this problem. I think in the UK it's been tackled by, fintechs with no association, and kind of showed up the big banks who have become really late to the game. Whereas it sounds like on your side, they're saying, here's your problems, back a small dynamic fintech type organization that can go and solve that in an agile way with the big backing of the traditional banks.
Yeah. And Norway has traditionally had a very climate of cooperation between the banks. So I think that has played into it as well.
I think that's fairly unique, like in Europe, at least in the world, at least that all the banks actually can work together and not looking at each other as competition in this area, because we only need one app. Like 4 apps sending money across banks, that's a hassle. But going from account number to phone number, I think that's like, it sounds so small, but that little thing has enormous effect.
Yeah, it's a sort of a big problem with quite a clean, clear, simple solution, and having one provider now across all of the Nordics region is phenomenal, right? It just makes it so simple. And when you make something so simple and clean for a consumer, you see huge adoption, right? It just becomes the de facto way that you operate within that region, which is great to see. That's really, really good insights. What I want to, and maybe going back to you, Espen, right? Because you started off singing Mixpanel's praises, which is great. So you haven't been a customer that long. What I'd love to dive into is maybe the drivers for looking at something like Mixpanel, and what was the de facto pre-state for accessing data, and then now it seems like we have this self-serve state, which is why Mixpanel exists. That's our why. So it'd be good to talk about pre-state, future state, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, Jørgen has been longer than me, but I came into Vipps believing that we have really good tracking on our users. Like, my first question was, how long does the user spend in the app? And it's like, I don't know. And there was all these crazy assumptions flowing around in the organization, and I was just thinking, like, could we have a tool that killed all this assumption or verified all this assumption? But really we didn't have, or we had Firebase, but I think only app developers had access to that. So we kind of assumptions flowing around in the design team, in the product teams, and there was really no good tool to either kill or validate those, and that was that for me at least was quite uncommon from where I came from. But now, like, we're seeing product teams putting in events and getting trackings on different stuff. We can just start to kill those assumptions and try to get a common view on the world, like how are our users actually using Vipps, because everyone had their own assumption on how the users are using Vipps.
I think we see that quite commonly across our customer base, where you've seen some strong early success and you're in hyper growth, you're kind of okay with the assumptions because it's all working, right? And your key KPI, which is revenue, is growing and your user base is growing. So you're quite happy just looking at those high level metrics because they're all positive and it's all like great. And then you get to a certain size of which you are, and then you think, wow, it's now pretty risky, because now if we take a step in the wrong direction, we start to lose all the gains that we've got. And then, in this sort of, well, maybe a little bit different in your region, but quite a fickle digital world, especially within the UK, you have other options, and you might think about changing if you put a step wrong. So we see that quite often. It's either one of two things. Either you start with, we absolutely need access to tracking and data from day one, or we have huge success and then we get to a point where we think, okay, we don't want to lose this now, and we want to hold on to that. So what does future state look like now? So across multiple teams, is it now the de facto? And was it easy changing from, hey, you came in, Espen, maybe with this preset way of working. What about those that had gone through the success without tracking it? Did they transition easily? Were they skeptical? How did they feel about it?
Well, Jørgen has been.
Yeah, Jørgen.
Maybe you can answer, like you have more context on the tree.
Yeah, I think we've done lots of things. Like the toolbox my team is working on basically consists of, we have Splunk, we have Grafana, we have Power BI running on some shared services. And we also did a bit of Firebase, Google Analytics, so they're like a plethora of services. But we figured out that it's really not that good for measuring the things we need to measure, because like we're in the phase now where we are expanding the product, as I say, going from hypergrowth to like, okay, we have a really heterogeneous user group. So we need to test everything we do, we need to test it. And that has been a real hassle to get implemented into the organization, both with event-driven architecture and also like data lakes or Power BI stuff, because when we need to do a change, like we want to test a feature, we've done some testing, like we need to gray out some fields to check if that increases conversion. It's not that big of a development task for us, but tracking, if we want to use the existing tools or the pre-Mixpanel tools, that was a really hassle, because then we needed to add the tracking, we needed to like update the contracts, we needed to have someone else work on some schema to get it represented the right way in Power BI. It will be uploaded daily, and all of these things that like creates a distance between the people actually needing to understand the data and implementing the tracking and the outcome of it. So with Mixpanel, it's so easy. Like everyone on the team has done Mixpanel integrations now, besides me. So we do our own events and we do the tracking. So the same developer that develops a feature can now see what effect that feature has, and he or she has ownership to it because he has implemented the tracking, and we don't have any dependencies to other teams, which really increases speed, but also the ownership for the people who needs to feel the data. So I think the future is, we will have a mix, because Mixpanel doesn't solve all the problems, but it solves lots of problems.
I want to add there that also bringing in the developers into making the actual tracking plan is really crucial to get ownership, and also like not only making the tracking plan, but as part of making a new feature, you kind of present the problem you want to solve, and we brainstorm features, and then what kind of value do you want to track, and then you introduce the metrics. What metrics will show that we create that value? And whenever you have the developers in the team on board on this framework, it's so easy to make the tracking plan. They know what events to put in. You don't have to make this long Excel sheet and kind of hand it over and like do this. It's like it should be part of the team dynamic to get that ownership. And then whenever the tracking is out, you just pull up the dashboards every meeting you have, and you see the KPIs and you see what you want to measure. And are we delivering that value we all agreed on? If not, what's the next iteration? What did we learn? A new assumption, and then we try to iterate on that. Then we have the numbers, and everyone knows how this is going based on the value we wanted to create. So.
Yeah, I love when we spoke before and you talked about you bringing Mixpanel as part of the onboarding framework for your developers so they truly understand. Hello, am I still on?
Yeah.
Sorry, my screen just I thought we'd had a power cut in London. I thought that was fantastic, right? The concept of using data at the heart of what your developers are doing is great, because sometimes something like Mixpanel or product analytics can be deemed as this is something that our product managers use, but what we're trying to do is really democratize data and put data at the center of every decision, right? So when you bring more people in and they can understand the data, access the data in a timely, meaningful way, people get more involved with that data, and it allows to go fast and close those barriers. And putting data at the heart of every conversation when you're iterating over development between a product manager and developer speaking that common language is really powerful. So that's great to see.
And,
we've
and
heard,
also,
please,
also out of the product tech sphere, because we are able to answer questions really fast coming in from sales or marketing or whatever, but they are also able to answer the questions themselves. So it's all about the democratization, as I say, because we can do lots of things in Splunk, but that's like nobody understands Splunk besides developers. So trying to post something around Splunk to a salesperson, that won't work. But Mixpanel it's easily readable and it's fairly easy to manipulate. So if you have a question, you can probably find the answer in Mixpanel. So and it also works for developers, like full circle.
And also prioritizing strategically, like should we go this way or should we go that way? If our session length is way below average of other apps, I'm not saying it is, but let's say it is, maybe this feature wouldn't be a strategic good bet to go on because we don't have that long sessions in the app. So you could kind of quickly pull up data to kind of choose a strategic direction, which could probably take a week before. So you can just pull up the data in the dashboard and to help you choose.
Yeah, and we see, of course, we know this internally, right? Because we obviously use Mixpanel, developing Mixpanel. So our engineering and product teams are so in sync, but we don't always see that in customers, right? It's quite difficult, I think, to start in certain organizations to break down that barrier and use something, because you can use Mixpanel for looking at here's our strategic long-term direction, but also we can use it as we go for ad hoc analysis at the developer level, at the product manager. You're always testing, iterating, asking questions, pulling up the data, and aligning to that big broad sweep that you've maybe looked at from the strategic. What would be good is, and whether it's a product or a feature ad or feature deprecation, do you have a tangible example of where you've used the insights to drive a change?
Yeah, well, we have had a few experiments now. We had this benefits experiment where we put up just deals on our home screen, and everyone was super worried that this would break the app. And we just did an experiment on 45,000 people, put in tracking for all the clicks and events in the app, and suddenly we got really, really much clever and killed a lot of assumptions and could have a more meaningful strategic discussions about how benefits and offers in the app affect users, instead of offers and benefits are going to kill the app. Like that assumption could easily be killed whenever you have that data really well presented. So that's one example, and we also made this new feature in a currency calculator for measuring the currency on when you send money on the P2P. And we had these KPIs on how much engagement we wanted to create in order to see if people actually were using it. And then we put up, we broke down the conversion rates for different countries, because you would obviously convert currencies when you're abroad. So really easily could you break down by country, so we could see that the conversion rate was much higher in foreign countries than Norway. So, and then whenever we have that benchmark, we could make a new iteration and set a new goal, like in foreign countries abroad. We should have a conversion of 90%, 80%, because you're obviously going to convert currency there. So really easy, like launching a new iteration and using Mixpanel as the main source of truth whenever you want to measure something. It's that's been really great.
That's really good to hear. What sort of time span are we talking about from concept idea to setting something, to implementing, to testing, to going, hey, we're happy, this is meta and it's now a core feature in our product? What does that look like?
I wish I could say I wish I
depending on
could
the
say
product. Yeah.
1 week, but we're like everyone else. We have our struggles, and we try to be as agile as possible. But
Yeah.
this certainly helps our speed. So not sure about it. It's really contextual dependent, like what
Yeah.
kind of feature, what kind of product.
Yeah, but it sort of enables us to go. We're doing it on the checkout, which is more like it's not in the app, so it's less complexity.
Yeah.
But we have a running experiment. We're using Mixpanel for A/B testing. We just had this assumption that if we remove as much info or presenting information stepwise to the customer, increases conversion rate. But then we made an experiment where we actually show like, this is you, this is the address, but we show like a grayed out field of some data, just hinting to what comes next, and set up an A/B experiment with Mixpanel because that is really easy. We just like random selector show screen 1 or 2. And now we're just waiting for the confidence level or whatever you call that green or red thing in the A/B testing panel to go green, and then we see that actually showing the data, sort of obfuscated data, will increase conversion by a couple of percentage points. So we will keep that feature. So that has taken us a couple of weeks, I think, from development to testing, and it will go into production as soon as the light turns green.
And then, so I know what would that have been pre-Mixpanel? You know, would you have?
We would have thought about it a lot, had several meetings, discussing with people with opinion, like, should we do this? Yeah, I think that we should do this because of something. And we would have made a bet and we would just implement something. We would basically know nothing about the effect it had because we weren't able to A/B test. Or we have done A/B testings prior to Mixpanel, but those have been very much harder to set up.
And what did you ever have? Because now, obviously, if it doesn't work, you roll back. Did you ever roll back anything that you decided to do on a gut feel? And how would you know? Pre-Mixpanel, how would you know that it had a negative impact, or do we just assume, given your numbers are all in the right direction, that they all had positive impacts? Would we ever retrospectively go back and test changes made to see, is it actually having a positive impact? Is it neutral? Is it negative?
Yeah, that would have been really nice to do. But that would, for our side, it would depend on since we are sort of live on P2B payments for merchants, introducing breaking changes or things that we think, we would need to think a bit about it. But to my knowledge, we haven't gone back on anything yet due to Mixpanel, but I'm sure there will come time we will do that.
Yeah, we see. I spoke to a customer yesterday who's now at the point where they're actively looking to deprecate. Right, what can we remove that's going to save on support and development time that has no negative impact?
Yeah, it's a really nice thought. We should do that more.
But I think for us, it's like you get a better gut feeling. Like you're not always after the source of truth, like the absolute truth of how reality is. But if you make a new feature, you have this first iteration, you have the data, like we're not going to roll back the feature. Like it comes from inside. People want the feature. But whenever you have the insight and the data, you make the next iteration in a different way. And then that's where you use the data. Like,
yeah, 100%. Leading with gut, right? That's got to be the first mover, right?
Yeah.
What's next? What's next for Vipps on this journey?
I think it's Nordic expansion is probably so consolidation, bit forward pay consolidation, and then Nordic expansion, then the world, I think.
Yeah, one platform is really big for us now. So it's actually only my team and that has some time to do new stuff, do new experiments. So new things are.
We're trusting your gut in the first instance to change the world in the Nordics.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust myself, but okay.
Well, at least now you can test, right?
I have Mixpanel now, so I'm good. So.
Yeah, so we can trust it for about 2 weeks, and if it doesn't work, we can.
Yeah.
Or we can trust it on a small batch, 45,000.
Yeah.
Is there anything else in your tech stack that you're using alongside Mixpanel in combination? Because we talk a lot about, a best of breed stack and how we support other technologies. Are you using anything for engagement where you're, driving cohorts from Mixpanel or anything like that you think's worth sharing?
Like using Mixpanel together with something, or just the stack we're
something
using?
around engagement, in-app messaging, or anything around that marketing side where you're creating cohorts of users in Mixpanel and driving them. Is that a combination? Have you started working? How close do you work with the marketing side of things, or is that all future?
I know Marketing Cloud, we use that some to set up segments for the voice team, that the team that's actually speaking to the users in the app. We have this module where we can put out new messages and new communication. They use Marketing Cloud to put up the segments. But it's not really integrated with Mixpanel. It's just a tool to make new segments and target audience.
Yeah, I think we're still pretty early in sort of our Mixpanel journey.
Yeah,
it's more about getting universal coverage of Mixpanel than doing the nice integrations.
Yeah, right now we're onboarding a lot of product teams, and new events are flowing into Mixpanel. So you could spend a day just killing assumptions if you would like.
That's nice, and a nice little on-purpose segue from me, or I should say segue from me. But the reason I bring it up is, of course, the Mixpanel is expanding our reach as well. So, we make that move we're making that move to Mixpanel for everyone, right? And we want more teams to be data informed. I think you guys are a textbook example about how you can adopt Mixpanel from a developer and product management side of things to really drive speedy innovation and change and insights, which is phenomenal. But what we're also trying to do is, as part of that sort of holy grail of growth is pull marketing a little bit closer and give one sort of common platform whereby, your developers are actively using Mixpanel to ask and answer their own questions, to iterate in combination with the product team, but then also in combination with the marketing team who are driving acquisition and also, I suppose, retention engagement within some of the applications. And we see it within payment apps and credit apps that we talk to and our customers, where they're really tight with their marketing team to drive and promote new features and to support with, conversions, as well as the design of the app, the engagement that they're driving through in-app engagements or web engagements. And that's my segue into transitioning from our conversation into our demo portion. I want to thank you both. Really, really insightful topics. Also, thank you for being a phenomenal customer and really diving into Mixpanel wholeheartedly and driving it across your organization. I wish you the best with the expansion across Nordics and maybe broader, right? So thank you both so much.
You.
Tom,
thank
if
you,
you're backstage, do you want to join me on stage?
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks,
guys. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Tom, for joining me and my not so subtle transition.
I like the segue. I did like the segue.
I thought I shoehorned it in there a little bit. But I think great example from Vips, right, of how they've brought two, different teams, the development team, the engineering team, and the product management team a lot closer by using a common platform and a common language. And of course, doing it in a way whereby they're gaining factual insights to drive change at pace while keeping an eye on their long-term strategy.
Yeah, no, agreed. And obviously the segue you're trying to lead me into is, well, how can we do that with other teams, right? Because there's lots more teams in an organization than just engineering and product. So one thing we're trying to do here is marketing, right? So we're now going to segue a little bit into a bit of Mixpanel. And I'm just going to share my screen and we're going to get into it because James has set me the task of doing Mixpanel marketing analytics for everyone in 15 minutes. Okay. And there's a lot more out there than just 15 minutes of Mixpanel, but we're going to start with the end goal. right? Because although it's a bit of a maybe counterintuitive way of starting Mixpanel, it does showcase how easy marketeers and new people to Mixpanel, that analytics for everyone, can get involved. Okay. And these new features really start with our boards. Okay, so boards in Mixpanel, as everybody's probably familiar, collection of reports that we've built. Okay, but sometimes it's actually nicer if people build those reports for us, right? Everybody likes an easy way in. Okay, and we now have this templates function. Okay, this templates function is being massively fleshed out at the moment. And the one I'm going to point us towards for this sort of marketing-based demo is going to be our marketing KPIs. Okay, so these are 15 reports or so that really can help us optimize our strategy. And if I just click the start from template, all I need to flesh this board out is just 2 simple events. Okay, I need an activation event and a conversion event, as simple as that, right? So for my kind of dummy data set here, I might consider my activation event something like a sign up, for instance, getting my users through that registration funnel into that activation moment. And ideally, if they're going to convert, maybe we look at something like a purchase, right? The users parting with their hard-earned money based on them coming in via one of my various marketing campaigns. Okay, and if I create this board, within a few seconds, it fully fleshes me out those 15 reports with some very useful metrics that marketers already look at today. Okay, so we have things like active users, the number of new users I've got, the number of purchases in that conversion moment, maybe something a little bit more deep, right? So the number of daily, weekly, and monthly active users, or where specifically those users came from. But we can go obviously even deeper than that. So we can look at things, since the channels my users are coming from. This is, of course, very important for our marketers to know exactly where my users are coming from. Okay. But we also have some more calculated metrics, right? Not everything is drilled down to raw numbers and information. So we might, for instance, look at bounce rate, or we might look at some session metrics, right? These metrics, not so simple to calculate, but we can do this out of the box. Okay. Now, the thing with this is it's a lot of end goal, right? But in reality, a lot of Mixpanel's new marketing analytics comes with new features that we've provided effectively. And we have to navigate from our board now into some of the actual reports. All right. So if I go into the reports function and into insights, we can start looking at something called ad spend, right? A lot of what marketers do currently is understanding, well, are the adverts that I'm serving to my customers having the impact that I would like them to? Okay, and what we can do now in Mixpanel is we can ingest this thing called aggregated data. So aggregated data is in form of that ad spend. So if I look at my select event, you can see here I've got this ad spend event. Okay, now it doesn't look too much when I just look at it in terms of the total number of ad spend events, because of course this is aggregated data. But what's actually important is when I look at things like the impressions, for instance, I might look at the number of impressions all of my adverts for my various ad networks have sent me. How many impressions did I have, for instance? Okay, and I can tell you the number of impressions I had from my various ad networks, Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, many more are available. But we could always combine that with something else, like, for instance, the number of clicks we had, right? Again, it's all well and good having an impression, but the number of clicks is probably more important to us, right? The number of people who actually engaged with our advert. Okay. And again, I could add a third one here because, of course, we're in a bit of a tough time at the moment. Maybe we'll look at the cost of those as well. Okay, so we've got 3 different parameters that our advertising networks that are provided to us in the form of this aggregated data. Okay, and in reality, we can't really learn too much from this line graph, right? Yes, I could tell you the number of impressions I had. So we had 450,000 impressions on Monday, May the 1st. But in reality, it's sometimes better if I migrate away from a line graph into something like a table. Okay, and this is just going to add all of those various data points together to tell me the number of impressions I had, clicks, and how much that all of those things cost at the end. Okay, but the beauty of this is that we can combine various ad networks. So a lot of marketers who are coming from Google Analytics can see their Google Analytics data. You might log into Facebook ads and see your Facebook data. What if we can have all of that data in one single space, right? And be able to compare and contrast those various ad networks. So you can see here I have a property called network. And if we break down those impressions, clicks, and cost by my ad networks, we can see the number of those values for each of my individual ad networks. Okay, and this is already giving me a little bit more information. So for instance, I can see that actually this organization spends most on Google Ads and doesn't spend too much on LinkedIn. Okay. But again, similar to the templates, this is a lot of raw data, right? And a lot of what the calculations marketers make involve these numbers, but slightly manipulated, okay? So for instance, one thing I might want to be interested in is the cost per click, okay? That is, of course, going to be my C over B, my cost per click. We might call that my cost per click. And using the formula function, I can start to give myself an actually slightly more usable, slightly more comparable metric. So if you remember previously, we looked at Google Ads, and Google Ads we were spending the most on, but actually the cost per click for Google Ads is the highest, right? So maybe this is something we want to migrate away from, because although it's only 4 cents, pounds, dollars, whatever it might be, that's actually quite a lot of money when we kind of scale these adverts to a large organization, okay? And we might look at something else. We might look at our CPM, for instance, right? That is, of course, our cost per milli. So that's the cost per 1,000 impressions. And we might look at that as C over A, and then we might times that by 1,000, okay? And now I have two very, very important metrics that I can look at and focus on just to make sure that my adverts are performing as well as each other effectively. And we can see, remember, if we could add those impressions in, or that cost in we saw previously, I can tell you how much my cost was. So we can see that Google Ads cost me £6,000 or whatever that is, but the cost per click of that was actually quite high. Okay. Of course, marketers are always growing, right? Well, they're always iterating, always changing. So what we might want to know is, well, my cost per click is, 0.25 at the moment, but was it higher or lower a month ago based on the adverts we've changed or the audience we've changed to our targeting? Okay, and we might compare this various functionality. So we might compare to, I don't know, the previous month, and we'll look at the uplift compared to my previous baseline. So actually our Google Ads have gotten more expensive, right? The green and red here is a little bit inconducive, but ideally we want these numbers to go down, because lower cost per clicks is a better thing to have, okay, because it's cheaper advertising for us. So our Google Ads has got more expensive, and our Google Ads CPM has got more expensive. Actionable outcome off the back of this, probably start to migrate away from Google Ads, because it's not performing well as some of the other categories we have. Okay. Now, this is very heavily focused on marketing, right? But a lot of companies we already work with will have product data inside. Okay, and this is the second half of the coin, right? With this new marketing analytics that Mixpanel has introduced, is we now have that marketing data in the exact same location as my product data. Okay, and as sort of James touched on with the VIPs guys, having a common language between two teams really solves a lot of problems. Okay, so if we just start on a brand new report quickly, I could save this if I wanted to, but we'll start with a brand new report. Okay. And if we think about that common language here, it's often interesting to know for my quite late events in my customer's lifecycle, how did our customers actually enter the website, right? Because we might have a purchase event long in the distant future of our customer's lifecycle, but knowing how they got in at the very beginning is something that's quite hard to do. Okay, so we might look at, if I just refresh my page very quickly, we might look at those purchase events. Okay. And we've got this lovely line graph that we have previously, and we might look at this in terms of that table again. Why not? Now, what we could do previously is we could break down by various parameters, but Mixpanel actually has a new parameter that we can use. And you can see here, it's called this attributed by. Okay, and this is effectively a way of bringing in multi-touch attribution to model that exact case of how did my customers actually enter the site, and what was the importance of those very early engagements with my user. Okay, and if we look at this attributed by, it brings me up another list of these properties, and maybe we'll look at that network again, right? That's similar to how we looked at those adverts. And what this shows me is it shows me my various sources based on the last touch attribution. Okay, and last touch, everybody is probably familiar with from funnels. The last touch gives all of the importance from when my customers came to my website to the last time we saw a property. Okay, so a user might have come to our landing page 3 times. We're giving all of the importance to that last landing page visit, which is when they came via Google Ads, for instance. Okay, but marketing teams are becoming much more advanced these days. Okay, so last touch and first touch don't generally answer all of the questions we have. Okay, so for instance, instead of last touch, we might look at that first touch, as we talked about, but actually we offer a load more attribution models to help answer more advanced questions. Okay, so we might look at linear, for instance, which gives those three landing pages that we talked about before equal weighting. Or we might do U-shaped, which gives the first and the last one slightly more weighting than some of our middle ones. Okay, Or we might look at that custom, okay, which is where we introduce this to, hey, look, we can't represent every single marketing team out there. So why don't you guys take the lead and find what model works best for you? Okay, so maybe as an example, we'll look at this in terms of a linear one, and I could tell you the number of purchases. Okay, maybe we'll add a second event here, which might be our number of purchases. But actually, instead of the total number of events, maybe we'll look at the value of those purchases, right? Because not all purchases are weighted easily. If you've seen James's hair this morning, it's probably quite a lot on hair cream. But maybe we'll look at the value of those various purchases as well. But we'll weight those in terms of, I don't know, a U-shaped model instead. Okay. But the beauty of this is we're now combining that product data and that marketing data. Okay, so marketing, we've got all of that juicy acquisition data from when our users hit our landing page from that ad set data. But products really care about those end goals, right? It could be signups, it could be purchases, it could be anything like that. We now have those two full data sets combined in a single place. Okay, and this really allows marketing teams and product teams to talk to each other to make sure that everybody is aligned on business goals. Okay. Again, we could compare this to look at previous time periods, or we could look at this in terms of overall, right? So based on my various sources, which one has higher or lower weighting compared to my overall set of purchases? So we can see that 24% of my purchases come in via Google Ads, but that only led to 23.9% of revenue. Okay. Now, of course, we could pick and choose this data to really optimize our advertising strategy and combine that with product's knowledge of the actual platform to get the best outcome for our users. Okay. And I promised James I'd do this in 15 minutes. In reality, we've sped through this in 13 minutes. It's probably raised more questions than answers in this whole process. But hopefully everybody can see how exactly we can combine these two really different sides of a business into one single platform and one single data set.
Bravo, Tom. I'm going to let that hair cream comment slide because you did it well within time. Maybe we'll open up if there's any questions. So any questions, please let us know. And there's one I'm going to jump to in a second. But what was really interesting to see there, if my assumptions are correct, is that, we were making some marketing assumptions based on the data, which were accurate at the time, which was that the cost per click in Google was high. So we might want to move away from that. But when we looked at it on how they interacted potentially when we got into the application, is that actually might cost a lot, but it's generating a lot of revenue. So by combining those two conversations, we're seeing the truer picture where we might not want to reduce, but maybe just balance it a little bit. So that's interesting. And of course, we can go into lots more detail around conversion and funnels and everything else that they do that isn't just that end purchase that we might want to consider before making a change on our ad spend.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Having the full picture, as you kind of disclaimed there, is the key here. Because otherwise, I mean, the Vips guys talked about it, right? They said making or choosing features on like gut feeling or assumptions. Right? And you might assume this from one half of the data when the other half of the data gives you a completely different picture. Perfect.
I'm going to ask you a quick question because I just see it at the bottom of the chat. One of the questions that came in is around about dependency on cookies. So does this analysis per ad network depend on cookies?
No. Okay, so this ad network data is effectively streamed to us from the various ad platforms. If you go into the docs tab in the chat on the right-hand side, you'll see there's a tracking ad performance doc. That gives you all of the documentation you need to set this up today. Okay, it doesn't require cookies. It's effectively us asking Google or Facebook or whoever that might be saying, hey, can you send us the ad data for yesterday, the day before, whenever it might be. So nothing to do with cookies. It's aggregated, so it's not like an individual level. And you can ingest it however you'd like, effectively.
One question that I haven't seen but suspect that it'll be coming is, hey, I'm a Mixpanel customer. Can I access all of this today?
So it's a good question. So this is probably subject to change. So obviously, I'm unfortunately not a product manager. Marketing templates, you can use them today. Okay. The ad spend, the documentation is all there. I encourage you to go and start setting this up today. Multi-touch attribution, I believe, is on the very cusp of leaving beta. Okay. So it might not appear in your little menu now, but it will be rolled out across all of our organizations soon. Okay, so that's the one which you might not see, and if anybody's gone to play around with it while we went through that demo, you might not have seen it's there, but it will be very soon.
Good insights. There's another question I'm tedious to ask it because I'm not sure if I understand it, but I'm hoping that, Tom, you do. But if Mixpanel Agent is installed on a QR or a short link generation server, when the user connects to the content server with Mixpanel enabled, can Mixpanel track the interaction between the two servers? These are separate servers, but under our control.
Sure. So I think the question we're asking here is, can we track a person across two different places, right? And the answer to that is yes. Okay, and this is probably not the right place and time for this sort of answer, but effectively we can pass information in URLs. Okay, so for instance, what we're talking about here is a unique ID for a unique user. You can pass that ID in a URL and then use it at the second place the user reaches. Okay, so as long as those servers are under your control and you control the URLs they provide, the answer is yes, you can track those two destinations.
Hopefully that answered the question. It sounded like it did. Impressive stuff, Tom.
What I try to do.
We are slightly running out of time, so unless there seems to be any other questions, I'm going to do a big plug for marketing analytics, because I think that we are continuing to push out new features. Hopefully people can see from our marketing release, our blog posts, that we are releasing amazing new features at a really high frequency of late. And this is all about adding more value to your existing Mixpanel licenses. So for the customers on board, I would encourage you to go and actively explore these new features, and also explore how these new features open up new use cases and new people across your organization to start gaining value from Mixpanel. What we are really trying to do, and demonstrated by the VIPS team very early, is bring more teams together on a common platform, talking the same language in a way that's really intuitive and encourages people to ask more questions of their data. The more times we are able to access data and insights, the better the decisions we make, whether we're in development, product management, or marketing. And if we can combine all of those teams, the outcomes that we can generate can be really, really powerful and ultimately driving your organizations forward. So I would encourage you to go and explore that. I would also encourage you to reach out. We're also always here available, always willing to do a deeper dive one-to-one with either a customer or a prospect that wants to learn more, because we only touched on the highlights today. And Tom, I'm going to volunteer you for each of those one-to-one sessions.
I thought you might.
Because your cheeky comment about my hair.
You'd be back.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We have reached time, but we will be back very soon with another episode of In Conversation With, where we'll be talking to another customer and probably demoing some new features that we've released because they're hot off the press this year. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Thanks, Tom. Bye.